So in the meanwhile that people come in, I just welcome you everybody to this quite late session of the Urban Dialogues. Not only late, but also a bit last minute. We had the great opportunity to have Federico in Amsterdam these days, and we decided to have this special session. And I want to thank Jules for organizing it. Thank you very much, Jules, for the responsiveness. We will start in 1 minute. So, but I would like just to introduce this session briefly before giving the word to Federico. So, Federico contacted me a couple of weeks ago, not much more. And indeed, he said, I'm in Amsterdam. I would like to present to your colleagues my new book. And I was thinking, knowing the book, I was thinking this is a great idea because indeed having the author introducing a new publication is always, I think, a luxury. And so I asked Jules to organize this extra meeting. I will not introduce for long. I just wanted to say that Federico is assistant professor in smart and sustainable urbanism at the Trinity College Dublin. And his book has a very nice title, I have to say. It's called Frankenstein Urbanism, Eco, Smart and Autonomous Cities, Artificial Intelligence and the End of the City, published by Routledge. I hope you will be interested in finding this book after this meeting. And I want just to say that Federico is a researcher that is specialized in the study of indeed in the critique of the smart urbanism and in the experimentalism that we also at the Center for Urban Studies have been studying a lot. And the first time I met him was actually in 2018 when I invited him to give a lecture at the Master Studio. And at that time already I had heard about Frankenstein, which was indeed to end up in his title. And so I understand that this book has been in the oven for some time, and we are really looking forward to see how it came to being and its content. The meeting today is structured in a very usual way. We'll have a half-an-hour presentation by Federico, and then we will have a half-an-hour discussion with the virtual room. So I hope you will have a lot of questions and comments to Federico. So Federico, I give you the word, and you can start your presentation. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Federico, for hosting it, Jules for organizing these events. If you're wondering where I am right now, I'm around, and the other Federico is right behind me. So it's kind of a hybrid setting, very Frankensteinian in a way, a bit of a mixed. So I think it kind of fits the theme of the talk. This book is telling a story, and it is a story about urban experiments. It is a story of the theories that preceded their developments, and of the monsters that followed and that might alter our cities to the point of ending them. And to tell this story in this book, I use Frankenstein, the book by Mary Shelley, as a framework and as an analogy. And so the narrative of this book follows very, very closely the narrative of Shelley's novel. And there are multiple stories in the book. Stories about cities, stories about their developments, of experiments, of inventors. And it is also the story of Victor Frankenstein, the protagonist of Shelley's novel, which is linked with the story of these experiments. And within this book, we'll find a lot of quotes, a lot of passages taken from Shelley's novel that I employ to make sense of the urban experiments that are changing the city of the 21st century. So this notion and this image of a Frankenstein urbanism is what cuts across all the different chapters of the book. And you're probably wondering, what it means to think about cities, urbanization, and urban experiments through the lens of Shelley's novel. And essentially, there is a double meaning when it comes to the way I evoke the notion of a Frankenstein urbanism. The first one is a way of narrating the evolution of urban experimentation from eco-cities to smart cities, and eventually to what I call the autonomous city, which is a city that is mediated by and to some extent controlled by an artificial intelligence. So it is a way of narrating this urban evolution by using Shelley's Frankenstein, the book and the story in the book, as a framework. Second, the idea of a Frankenstein urbanism describes a specific type of urbanism, an urbanism whose products, so we're talking about the many urban spaces and cities that are built by following this type of urbanism. So a type of urbanism whose products resembles the monster of Frankenstein, the monster that is described very in depth in the novel by Shelley. And that is a fragmented entity. If you remember the image of Frankenstein as it is commonly pictured, it is a creature that is made of different components that are cobbled together. They're very, very different from each other, and the inventor had stitched them together, and because they are so different and incompatible, that we have these monstrous and fragmented entity. It is also an entity that I argue escapes human control and human understanding. If you remember the novel by Shelley, a lot of issues are down to the fact that Victor Frankenstein, the protagonist, cannot really understand his creature, is not capable of developing even a basic dialogue. And so this monster gets out of control. And this is particularly telling in relation to the final part of the book and the discussion of the role that artificial intelligence is playing nowadays in the planning and the governance of cities. The book has a structure that is based on the structure of Shelley's novel, and it is divided into 3 parts. The first part is called the literature. It is quite theoretical, and again, the book really gets into the narrative of Shelley's novel. In the beginning of Shelley's novel, the protagonist, Dr. Victor Frankenstein, who is the quintessential, almost stereotypical romantic inventor looking for an impossible ideal to realize, he embarks on a quest for the creation of the ideal human being, the perfect human. But he knows that in order to do so, he has to read a lot. He has to find information about similar experiences that were carried out in the past. So in the beginning of the novel, Victor Frankenstein surrounds himself with books. He spends time and time in his library. And this is what happens in the book Frankenstein Urbanism. First we dig into the literature to understand the meanings of smart urbanism, ecological urbanism. And in this first part of the book, I try to make sense of these concepts and theories that we use quite often, smart city being one of them, to really understand, what the meaning is of these concepts. And then the second part, the experiments, the idea is that as Victor Frankenstein finally enters the laboratory and starts experimenting, he starts creating his ideal human being. At least that's the plan. So in the second part of the book, we look at concrete experiments that are taking place in cities, and there are two main case studies that I discuss in detail. One is Masdar City in the Emirates as an example of a project for an eco-city experiment, and the second one is Hong Kong as an example of smart city experiments. And then the final part is called the apocalypse, and I go back to the original meaning of the term apocalypse, meaning a revelation. So the idea is that once the experiments has been completed, we look at the consequences of these experiments. We face what we have created, and we try to make sense of what is coming next. And what is coming next, I believe, is a city that is more and more being controlled by non-human intelligences. And the last part of the book talk a lot about artificial intelligences and the role that these non-human intelligences are playing in the evolution of cities and in our everyday life. And this is exactly what I want to focus on for the remainder of this presentation. I'm going to illustrate some of the new concepts that I have developed as part of these book projects. I believe that we are facing new realities and some unprecedented events, phenomena that require a new vocabulary in a way to really make sense of what's going on. And one of the concepts that I play with in the book is the notion of urban artificial intelligence. Now, artificial intelligence has been for many years now the domain of mostly computer scientists, partly engineers, to some extent philosophers, but it's been really touched upon by urbanists. And this is really what I do in the book. I dig into the notion of artificial intelligence, and I talk about it from the perspective of urban studies, urban planning, urban geography. And so an urban artificial intelligence is, I argue, an artificial intelligence which is embodied in urban spaces, in urban infrastructures, and in urban technologies. It is also an intelligence, an artificial intelligence that is capable of sensing the environment. And, you know, this is done in many different ways. You can think about sensors, CCTV cameras, and, you know, many urban technologies that we are already familiar with because they've been popular in smart city projects for over a decade. But what is new is that urban artificial intelligences, they're not simply sensing the environments, they're also making sense of it, and they are developing concepts. And the capability of developing concept, this is language that I borrow from computer science, but basically developing concepts is about making sense of what we see, you know, processes that can be very complex, situations that are not straightforward, especially for a machine. And I give you a very, very quick example, just on the basis of what I see around me. So I'm in a room in your beautiful department, which looks really nice, I have to say. There's beautiful lights, nice interiors. And so as I look around, I have sensors. I can touch, I can smell, mostly I can see. And, you know, next to me, I can see Federico, and I'm sensing this person next to me. But, you know, I've known Federico for a while now, and Federico is not just a person made of, you know, flesh and bone next to me. He's also a friend, and so I'm capable of understanding, you know, the concept of friendship, and I can evaluate the person next to me as someone who is good, who has, you know, values that, according to my own ideals, have meanings, and I appreciate them. And, you know, this is something that we humans, you know, we do all the time. So, for example, right now you are listening to this presentation, you are watching me, and you are sensing, you are getting data, you're getting information, but you're also developing, you know, opinions, ideas about, you know, everything that I'm talking about. And this is something that I argue machines with artificial intelligence nowadays are capable of doing. And, you know, we will see that this has a huge impact on urban developments. And last but not least, the actions of an urban artificial intelligence are autonomous in the sense that humans are not steering them. So humans are still in the loop, but they are not forcing machines to act in a certain way anymore. Machines are becoming more and more free to act as they want, and in so doing, they are becoming autonomous urban technologies. That is one of the arguments in the book. There are many types of urban artificial intelligences that I discuss in the book by giving a plethora of examples. One category is represented by robots, service robots in particular. My aim in this part of the book was to show how ordinary such technologies can be. I wanted to shift the focus out of fancy experimental cities that, you know, very few people have seen, and especially in the last part of the book, I wanted to focus on ordinary urban spaces. So, for example, this picture that is taken from the book is not in some like cutting edge urban projects in Southeast Asia. It is a picture taken in a very ordinary city in Italy. And if you look at, you know, what I love about this picture is that, you know, there is a robot, which is, you know, obviously very cutting edge and avant-garde, technologically speaking. But if you look at the people in these environments, and if you focus on the gaze of these people, you know, where these people are looking at, nobody's paying attention to these robots. You know, these robots has become the new normal in this little Italian town. and everybody's focusing on something else. So I talk about the diffusion of these urban AIs, and I talk about their implications. There are many, and today I'm just giving an overview of some of their main ones. You may not know that the term robots is not an English term. It is a Czech word, robota, meaning forced labor. And, you know, essentially this is what robots are. They are labor. They are autonomous machines that are disrupting labor systems. And there are two direct consequences. One has already been studied quite a lot over the past 5 years, unemployment. And it's quite obvious to think about how, you know, machines, autonomous machines are going to replace humans, because, you know, this has happened already a few times in history. Another consequence that I talk about is the idea of losing part of our happiness, as we might have to find alternative jobs in sectors which we may not like, but we have to, because we might have to look for sectors that have not been colonized by robots in the job markets. And to do so, I draw quite a lot upon the philosophy of Aristotle, who's probably one of the main sources in the book, theoretically speaking, and the notion of eudaimonia, in simple terms, the idea of happiness. And, you know, Aristotle in his works talks a lot about how cities are the places where we can, you know, discover our own identity. We can find fulfillment. We can fulfill our dreams, our passions, our desires. And I argue that artificial intelligences might rob us. They might take some of our eudaimonia away from us. And that's something that we need to be very, very careful about. Another common example that I'm sure you're familiar with, especially in the Netherlands, because this country in particular has been pushing forward for the deployment of autonomous cars. And this is precisely another category that I analyze in the book with regards to urban AIs. This is a technology that is going to have massive repercussions in terms of urban design and urban mobility, as cities will have to be, you know, redesigned to partly accommodate these new means of transport. I talk about also how these new technology is going to affect our experience of time, almost as a metaphysical experience, as we might stop being the drivers as we become more and more passengers as we experience cities. Another example as well of how this is an ordinary technology that you don't find only in experimental cities. This picture was taken in San Francisco. The model you're looking at is a Zoox car. Zoox is a company that is part of Amazon. And in the book, I also talk about how big tech players are involved, not only in the release of these new urban AIs, but also in the redevelopment of cities. So there is a fair amount of work on smart urbanism, neoliberal urbanism, and really the impact that the visions of private companies are having on the future of cities and on our future as well. And then last but not least, this is hands down my favorite kind of urban AI, not because it is the most positive one, but because it is really, really scary, and it always keeps me alert, because I want to understand what will happen next with such powerful urban AIs, and we're talking about city brains. And essentially, a city brain is a large-scale artificial intelligence which resides in a digital platform. They're quite popular in China. They are spreading all over Asia, and I argue that we will see this kind of urban AI in the future in the West as well. And this is why right now we should be careful. We should look at what's happening elsewhere, because this might become our reality in the near future. And so essentially, this urban artificial intelligence senses the environments by means of hundreds of CCTV cameras that are scattered around the city. So it can develop a spatial awareness, the understanding of what's happening in the city. And what is unique is that a city brain is capable of using this information about the presence in the city to understand what is likely to happen tomorrow, and then the day after tomorrow, and then next year. So it's a technology that is capable of foreseeing urban future. But not only, this knowledge about the presence is employed to govern cities today. And so this is essentially an urban artificial intelligence which is involved very heavily, I argue, in the governance of cities. And it is precisely this situation, so the presence of non-human intelligences involved in the governance, in the development of cities, that, in my opinion, is leading us towards a condition that I call the end of the city. And this is really the last part of the book. And by the end of the city, I do not mean a global calamity, like a global Armageddon that is going to destroy cities, infrastructures, and urban spaces that are gonna kill us all. What I mean is the termination of the city as a place that is predominantly governed, planned, and experienced by human intelligences. And again, this is due to the fact that non-human intelligences, such as city brains, are becoming more and more prominent in the governance of cities. So this might be the end of the city. It is certainly at the end of the book that I hope you will check out. And it's also the end of the presentation, at least for now. I look forward to your comments and questions. So the book is already out as a paperback, and any comments, critique, idea is super, super, super welcome. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Federico. Virtual applause. Actually, you can hear me applauding on this side of the room. Thank you again. Thank you very much for this actually synthesis of this book that I imagine is very rich, knowing the repertoire of cases that you are also describing in it. I would invite people to raise their hand via the tool. I see also that people praise very much the cover of the book, and indeed I have to join this praise. So I would like to invite people to raise their hand if they have questions. And maybe to warm up, I can ask the first question, just to give them the time to prepare theirs. So I agree with you that the raising of artificial intelligence in cities is indeed not only fragmenting the working of city, but also making it more and more independent from processes that are actually much more, to a certain extent, human or even not intelligent. Politics, conflicts, negotiations, values that can change, etc., etc. But what about a scenario in which, a less apocalyptic scenario in which this artificial intelligence becomes a tool that can be governed by a collective and non-artificial intelligence? What is the scale of this possible scenario? Is this anything that you envisage in the book? What are the the pathways of hope within this picture, if you have any in your book?
Sure. Thanks a lot for this very important question, Federico. I do reflect upon these issues in the very last part of the book, and I have something to say right now. But do bear in mind that this is a topic that I unpack more in the final chapter of the text. So there are a few things to say. The first one is that there is indeed the possibility to cooperate potentially with artificial intelligences, and this is actually a debate that really cuts across disciplines. And I have a few collaborations going on with computer scientists, and they are debating over the possibility of human-machine cooperation. So there is a big question mark. But what I feel it's happening is that these human-machine cooperations are very, very, very niche, in the sense that the cooperations that we're talking about are between potentially an artificial intelligence and a small elite of computer scientists, of developers of new technologies, of the few stakeholders, people like Tesla, Google, the likes of Amazon. So those who develop these technologies, they have a say in how these technologies are being developed, and consequently they have a say on how they're going to impact on society. And because the development of these new urban AIs is following the same trend of smart urbanism, and we know for a fact that most of the time smart urbanism rhymes with neoliberal urbanism, that is a fairly undemocratic kind of urban development, because most of the urban population is not involved in the making of these new technologies and their impacts. The problem is that if there is going to be a dialogue, if there's going to be a cooperation between AIs and machines, which is per se a remote possibility, it's going to be an undemocratic cooperation that is going to left most of us out of the game.
Thank you, Federico. Is there any other question or comment by the audience?
I can see that Maria has her hands up.
Oh, really?
And also, there are a few people, yeah.
Oh, I don't see it. Ah, yes, I now see that. Yes, Maria, please.
Hello, thank you, Federico, for a fantastic talk, and also for the book we offer to the academic community. Following up on Federico Savini's question, I walk a long way, if not all the way, with you on the being critical of smart technologies and AI and what they can do in terms of increasing discrimination and everything, all the evils you described. I'm just wondering, as you were talking, I was thinking also, however, about the historicizing this, and I remembered having read and worked on how new technologies, how much were resisted at any given historical moment. So the early modernity was a prime example of that, where everything from electricity, electricity is a prime example, actually. People were afraid of bringing this into their homes. To even the sewage networks, and how all these new networking and technologies were resisted. However, we now have, it's part of history, and we have better knowledge of them and a distance from them to see that, yes, people were right in resisting in some aspects, but at the same time, they brought in place new urbanities, and they actually created, at some points, they leveled out some inequality. So I wanted to ask you if you wish to reflect. If we try to, we can't put this, what's happening today, in historical context, right? We will only know in 50 years' time from now. But can you reflect a bit on similarities or differences between what is happening today and the historical context of this implementation? And urbanism, of course, has always been weaved around, and urban imaginaries have always been weaved around new technologies. So that's why I find so powerful your argument in capturing what is happening at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. That's a really good point. Yes, I have a couple of things to say in relation to your comments. One is about the, contestation, like, contesting these new urban AIs. And I talk about this in the book, and actually I have a new paper that is specifically on that, so hopefully it will be out early next year. Because I was under the same impression, right? I have a background in history, and I'm familiar with what you're saying, and I was also thinking that sure, these technologies are going to be contested. People are not going to be very comfortable, especially with such a radical technology, right? We're not talking about a piece of infrastructure that is static. We're talking about something that can think, something that can act, something that has an intelligence, something that can be very scary. And that's why I use Frankenstein as an analogy here. And I was doing research specifically about autonomous cars to get deep into these problems, and this book is the culmination of years of work on the topic. And I'll tell you something interesting about the data set. So basically, in a nutshell, we ask people, how do you feel about autonomous cars? Is there something that you're afraid of? Is that something that you're comfortable with in terms of like privacy, security? And it was amazing to see that in our sample, it was pretty big, over 1,200 respondents. Most people, talking about 90% of them, they had like huge fears in relation to artificial intelligence. They were very uncomfortable with the idea of having a non-human intelligence in charge of a human situation. So it was clear that people were afraid of artificial intelligence, in particular in the context of autonomous cars. But then the amazing thing happens when you ask the same people, okay, you are afraid of this technology, fair enough, me too, would you employ it? And the majority of people said, yes, we're going to go for it. So, that says a lot about human beings and, how strange the way we think is. And like in the book, I talk quite a lot about these tension between, we can fear something, but we can also be attracted by the same thing, and we might end up using it, so we might not resist it. And again, I'm simplifying for the sake of time, but in the book you will find a more elaborated discussion based on theories from the behavioral sciences and from social psychology. And the basic idea is that even if we fear something, we find benefits, if we find advantages in that thing, we're going to go for it. And the thing is that when it comes to these urban AIs, there are a lot of potential benefits. Now, they're not going to be evenly distributed. We know that for sure. In the long run, they might be more evenly distributed. So I'm in the book, I've tried to, although I'm critical most of the time, but I've tried to put forward a balanced picture of the situation. And there are technologies that I believe raise a fair amount of potential. And like going back to the examples of autonomous cars, they can be a way of decreasing car ownership, provided that they go hand in hand with car sharing services. There can be a way of like reducing car accidents. So there are benefits that in the long run might be more evenly distributed, but I think that like the risks outnumber and outweighs the potential benefits. And I'm 100% sure that there will be very, very little resistance to this new tech.
Thank you, Federico.
Thank you, Maria.
I would ask Yinsu and Jules, maybe we can take two at the same time. For the sake of time.
Okay, thank you for the presentation, and thank you for encounter on the street. So no, as I say, like I'm here. It's a very interesting presentation, but correct me if I'm wrong, but from a few friends, researcher friends that study human-machine relationship, that I kind of understand, like now, like I think we talk AI as if everything is automate, but it's actually not yet. So AI still require a huge amount of labor-intensive labeling done by human beings. Means all these data still came from the identification of human, then sort of the machine can proceed amount of data, but the hard work, dirty work still done by human beings. So, and then on the other hand, since it's done by human, cities, there's another contrast to these AI proceeding. There's also civil technologies going on, means that with the help of AI, same with like labeling, we could also use the technology into more sustainable or more environmental steering project. So how do you reflect upon technology? At the end of the day, it's about ideology and how we use it. And you know, as you said, like human made Frankenstein, but what are opportunities we can turn it in different way for the good cause?
Sure, that's a very important question. You know, there are opportunities, and it is absolutely fair to say that humans are in the loop for now. They're involved in the making of these technologies, and again, the Frankenstein metaphor is apt in the sense that we're talking about human-made products. The issue in Frankenstein story is that Victor Frankenstein creates something, the creature, but then that doesn't care about it anymore. So there is no caring, there is no education. The creature is just left by itself, and it develops in unprecedented and unexpected ways. And there is also no regulation. The inventor, Victor, can do exactly what he wants, what he wishes, and is not regulated by anyone. Is free to experiment. Is even free to leave his creature by itself. And like in the book, I talk quite a lot about regulation and the absence of regulation. These are experiments that are heavily deregulated. They can go wherever the developers wish to. They are undemocratic in the sense that the ideas of people like you and me are not taken into account. And I fully agree with you. That there are people involved, and that there are opportunities potentially to be put on the table, because like you, I can see how these technologies may be used for a good cause. But if we don't get involved, if we don't have a say, if there is no regulation, And if there is a neoliberal urbanism underpinning this machine, and our ideas are not going to be put on the table, then the only opportunities that we will see implemented are the opportunities that people from Tesla, Amazon, very, very few players can imagine. So it's not going to be our imagination that will be fed into the concepts and the actions that these new machines are going to put forward.
So just to catch up, so do you mean that, I mean, we as urbanists, we also have to step into the game?
Absolutely. And a point that I make very clear in the very beginning of the book, in the introduction, is that our response should be exactly the opposite response that Victor Frankenstein goes for in Shelley's novel. So in Shelley's novel, Victor ends up hating the monster. He really despises it to the point that he decides that, okay, I'm going to kill this creature. I'm going to take up a gun, chase this monster, hunt him down, and kill it. And I think that our answer should be the opposite. Our answer should be love in the sense of making an effort to understand how these experiments work, how these artificial intelligences think, and also love as politics, making an effort to get involved in the politics of urban development, the politics of experiments, and push it, protest takes that much, so that our ideas, our imaginations get fed into these new processes of techno-urban development.
Thank you, Federico. There was Jules before, and I don't see the blue hand anymore. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. A while ago, I came across the term the wise city. And even though I'm not sure if I have a clear idea of what the term means, I know that they are also very critical of the smart city. And I was wondering if you could comment on how your book relates to this, and yeah, what you think of the term in the literature.
Of the wise or the smart city? Because I'm not...
Wise city, yes.
Okay, I think I've heard about it, but I haven't come across often to this term in the literature. If you can tell me more about what the notion means, I can definitely comment on
yes,
that.
okay. I'm not so sure myself, but I think part of it is also that in shaping the city, people lose their say. So they are very wary of securing this participation. And I think that's the essence of the term. But yeah, I was hoping you could maybe tell me more about it, but maybe not.
What I can say is that in the literature on smart urbanism, and definitely in the case studies that I worked on, there has been always very little involvement from the public, and so this idea of smartness has been mostly about developing big data sets, processing data, so that there can be a fairly precise understanding of what's going on around us. And I think the notion of spatial awareness, to be aware of everything that is happening around us is a good one to encapsulate what a smart city is ultimately looking for. But then when it comes to, okay, we have this data, this information that is fairly precise in terms of space and time, then what do we do about it, and who gets to decide what we're going to do? And then the answer is that, again, most of the time, because it's either like a neoliberal project, or is it taking place in authoritarian countries. And I talk about the Emirates, which is a very good example of an authoritarian regime implementing urban experiments. Another example that I talk about is China. The ideas that are being taken on board to steer the direction that these new technologies are going to take are not coming from the majority of the population. So if there is wisdom, a wise city, it is not certainly the wisdom of the people. It is the wisdom of a bunch of technocrats that, in my opinion, poorly understands that these technologies will have huge social and urban consequences. And what I try to do in my book is to illuminate what artificial intelligence is likely to do from a social and urban point of view. And this might be even like something little and insignificant, like autonomous cars are going to change the infrastructure of your city, which an engineer might say, well, that's not a big deal. Well, in the book I show you, no, that's really a big deal actually, because you can influence the experience of time of people. You can completely change dynamics in terms of mobility. And so all these little repercussions matter. And we as a collective should get involved and think about it and build a collective wisdom, if you will.
Luca had a question as well.
Yes, thank you. It's very thought-provoking. I had two very different questions, but I just make one, which is connected to this discussion that's going on machines and humans. First, an observation, because sometimes you talk just humans and machines, but then you say also, I mean, there are humans behind these machines. I mean, it's not just machines out of nowhere. They come, so that I think it's important to keep remembering. But let's talk about the humans that are not us. So I think that we should not underestimate the agency that we have. And let me use an example, a traditional car, because when in its high days, it was as powerful, pervasive, all-encompassing as AI might be now. And you saw in cities, if we go back, you see very different reactions. You see, I mean, it's a big black and white, but cities kind of accepted it, and cities that contested it. And Amsterdam is one of in that second category. And out of that contestation emerged a city which is very different, in which the car is there, but has a very different role than other cities, which just gave up basically. So, and if we look now at what's happening with autonomous cars, you could see, I mean, there is at least a similar possibility, because at the beginning, the discourse was really how cities should adapt to autonomous cars. But more and more now, there are people reversing the questions how autonomous cars should adapt to cities, which might include they can't, so we are better not deploy them. I mean, so you see more and more, even in this very city that you said correctly, it's been becoming more and more critical, even in it's not solved. But so I think this is an important. I mean, we should have this awareness and use this space. These things does not just happen. There are political processes in which we have agency.
Like 100%, Luca, I 100% agree with you. And I make just 3 short points. One is that I do believe that we have agency. We have a lot of agency, but I also believe that the time to use this agency is now. We shouldn't wait too long. Like the pace of technological development of AI is absolutely insane. It's so fast. So if we wait too long to make these important decisions as a collective, well, I really have no idea what's going to happen next, and so we shouldn't risk this. So I agree with you that we should not underestimate our agency, but at the same time, I would urge everyone not to overestimate our agency. Second, because my approach is also quite
Maybe I can yours.
Yes.
Yeah, I lost you.
We are improvising.
Okay, okay. So I got you the first point of the speed that we have to act now, but you had other 2 points.
Sure. And so, yeah, the second one is that it's going to be a very geographical phenomenon, and we will see differences across space. You mentioned the case of the Netherlands, which is very exciting. I look forward to following them, following these developments in Dutch context more closely. I'm thinking about new cities that are being built on the basis of an AI urbanism, meaning that like artificial intelligence is at the core of the master plan. And you should check out a project called The Line in Saudi Arabia. It's a new city built from scratch. And the idea is that there will be artificial intelligence overarching everything that is happening in this. Literally everything that you can think of will be monitored by an artificial intelligence. So we will see a lot of differences looking around the world. And third is that what I talk about in the book is that artificial intelligence is really an umbrella term that like many of us employ to talk about what are actually very different things. And so what I do in the book is that I analyze the different kinds of urban AIs, showing how different types of AI are going to have different effects. And the case of the city brain, I believe, is very emblematic. The idea of having a single artificial intelligence that have a say in the governance of cities, like an AI that can decide, okay, this person is dangerous, or this neighborhood should be redeveloped because we're not making much money out of it. So the idea that these decisions are being made by an artificial intelligence and that they're having repercussions on like hundreds and hundreds of people. It's happening in China. It's not happening in the Netherlands. So again, geography matters quite a lot. So we should be aware of as much as possible what is happening around us, because today is China, tomorrow maybe the Netherlands. Who knows?
With this positive note, I would, I think we need to close, because you told me to leave at 7, right?
That's right.
Yes. So I thank you everybody for joining this late afternoon session, and I invite you to find the book one way or the other and read it. Thank you again, Federico, for passing by to Amsterdam.
Thank you.
And I hope to see you again soon, and see you to all the colleagues. Thank you.
Keep in touch. Thanks a lot, everybody. It was a real pleasure. Very inspiring to get your feedback. Thank you very much.